Well, guys, I think we can give it 1 or 2 more minutes just for a couple more people to join us, and then we can start going through this topic. While I do that, I think maybe it's a good time to introduce you all. I know a lot of you. I know all of you pretty well. A lot of you haven't met. Paul and Yuliya, you guys met last year, and Alecia on calls. Tim and I go a long way back. We were actually at Stellenbosch together, so we studied together. Difference is Tim actually studied, which was a good call. And then we've got well, let me start from the beginning, and I'm just going to go in alphabetical order here. Alecia Gabriel, or Dr. Alecia Gabriel. She's an ENCONA team member. She did her PhD in
organic
chemistry. All right. And so Alecia is our operations director for North America. So from studying chemistry, you've been in the automotive industry for a good 6 or 7 years now. And with ENCONA, which is great, and we've loved having you on board. And then another one of your projects that a real passion of yours is obviously the Motor City Steam project. And getting maybe it's better if you tell everyone about that really briefly.
Yes.
Just so I can get some context.
Yes, so I'm one of the co-founders of Motor City Steam Foundation, which is a nonprofit here in Michigan, in Detroit. And basically what we do is we go out into the community and make sure that youth have access to STEAM education. So that's science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. And I'm just very passionate about that aspect of learning, to make sure that young people can actually get and go into careers in automotive and aerospace and things of that sort. So even where I am today. So it's a passion project of ours.
Great. Thanks, Alecia. And then Dr. Yuliya Prakopchyk, we've worked together for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. So it's been a while. We've been a licensed partner of VDA's for 10 years, actually. And I think was it 2016 or 2017, you came in to run learning for VDA-QMC?
2017.
Okay, and you did your PhD in didactic methods, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. I remember. You see, I listened to some of these conversations. It's a good thing. Professional training, right?
Correct.
And that's you kind of held, and then bravely moved off into automotive.
Yep. Actually, I'm used
which
to...
is a very... Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I actually used to work for industrial sector previously. Before I started my job at VDA-QMC at the Federal Institute for Vocational Education Training, I was responsible for industrial sector as well. Okay. So it's not really a completely new subject at VDA-QMC for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thanks for joining us today. And next on the list, we've got Dr. Paul Kostolnik. Paul and I worked on a big VR project together last year, which was very exciting. Both of us, exciting for me, and did some really fun things in that space. Paul, you did your PhD in technology and training, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I did my PhD in psycholinguistics by looking at learning transfer, how you can manage to get the best learning transfer. Yes, I did this at the LMU in Munich, and it was for me always the big question how to get the best measurement on this, how to get the best transfer measured. And in these times, technologies as VR and AR came up. The first devices have been on the market, and that was for me kind of this initial moment, because by using this, for instance, VR headsets, a door opened in which you can just ensure learning transfer and how to get the best outcome of physical and as well non-physical trainings.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. And then you went into entrepreneurship. You know, I met you originally when I think you were 1 or 2 years into Ingman Interactive, and that I believe, you know, that got bought out, and now you're heading up XR for Europe and Accenture. I mean, that is pretty much the journey I know that since I've known you.
As well, yes. so I'm
as well
the XR lead for ASGR, so Austria, Switzerland, Germany, and Russia. And I'm as well the global offering lead for XR collaboration within Accenture. So that's something we're currently covering as yes, XR collaboration is heading fast forward, as you all probably know, due to COVID. So we've got a couple of, yes, within Accenture, a couple of different sub-offerings like virtual design thinking workshops, virtual product presentations, virtual exhibitions, but as well immersive learning, immersive marketing, and the whole connected worker topic, which as well I'm responsible for.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for joining us. And then last but definitely not least, we have Tim Null. As I mentioned earlier, I've known Tim since varsity days, trying to help me out to get through university and pass it. After university, you were one of the founders of Lobster Ink, which was a business you guys brought up from founding in, when was it, around 2008. And you sold it 2 years ago, I believe.
Correct.
So
yes,
that is a great journey.
Yeah, it's a great journey. And what Lobster Ink specialized in was initially live training in the most remote parts of Africa, especially in the hospitality industry. But very quickly, as we scaled and as the company grew, it was imperative for us to find a way to take our learning methodologies and the content that we were teaching across the continent and put it into a digital platform. And you know, over the past 14 years, that's what Lobster Ink has specialized in, was really training most of the world's big hospitality establishments at scale using our combination of technology and content. We did everything in-house, and it's the exact opposite, I would imagine, of what Paul has done. And it sounds like what a lot of the background here is in the academic side of learning and how, you know, knowledge transfer through from a theoretical perspective taken forward. Lobster Ink's entire approach and methodology was done by testing things out in the actual spaces we were working in and seeing what stuck. And I can say our what we ended up calling our learning science was definitely not a science.
Tim, we seem to have lost you for a second there. Okay, well, let me take over for a second while he just gets his connection back. So, you know, I know Tim, you know, Lobster Ink grew into quite a massive business, and I just thought it would be an interesting balance for everyone with this, you know, or with a focus on XR. Yuliya, with coming from industry and such a strong experience from industry, Tim from the entrepreneurship perspective, Alecia from a training perspective, but also with the projects in STEAM. All right, so while we do that, maybe we can start by introducing the topic. So today, delivery methods for practical learning. Okay, our topic covers, it's a pretty broad topic, but it covers digital learning. So learning online, learning in a VR classroom, learning in any digital form. We're also going to touch on some of the other delivery methods like blended learning, but that's really a secondary focus. Our primary focus is which content types to use within delivery. And I think that's really what we want to discuss today. Tim, we got you back.
Can you hear me now? I'm making a plan B here.
Yeah, we've got you. Are you on the phone?
Sorry. Yeah. So just in a nutshell, we ended up, our platform was training, over 1 million people a day in 120 countries in about 23 different languages, and working with the world's biggest hospitality groups, like Marriott International, where we were training all 800,000 of their staff in a wide variety of skills, from extremely basic to management level training, and using our combination of technology and different content methods to see what could affect behavioral change as quickly as possible and make it last. And that's really where we built our business.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Tim. While you were out of the call, I just gave a quick introduction to the topic. But I think you've got that in front of you, the delivery methods for practical and digital learning, and then focusing more on content delivery, and then in a secondary way, also a platform and delivery methods. So I'm going to an open discussion around these points and questions, but as I said earlier, the first question I'm going to ask, unfortunately, is a bit of a negative one. But we've all been in industry. We've all seen a lot of online learning. Unfortunately, sometimes just a slideshow is put up and that's considered learning. I just wanted to know from the panel, what do you consider bad online learning, or what turns you off about digital learning? Maybe we could start with Alecia.
Yes. So I think that there are a few things from my perspective that constitutes bad learning. And one of the first things is kind of the instructor maybe not being or creating something or a space where learners feel comfortable and competent to participate. So for example, if the instructor is extremely or reading off of a presentation the entire time, that's obviously not going to be very engaging for the learners and is very challenging, especially in the midst of Zoom fatigue and things of that sort. So that's definitely one thing. And then I also think that it's really important to make sure that the instructor implements various methods for discussion and collaboration. A lot of times that may or may not be used during, especially in any in-person or virtual classroom, right? And so I think both of those, those are two big things that for me are very important, right? We have to make sure that the instructor is engaged and that the instructor cares enough to ensure that the learners also become engaged and have a great discussion around the topic that they're learning about.
Absolutely. Sorry, Yuliya, I think I lost you there for a second. From your side, what are your thoughts on bad online learning, or what constitutes?
From my perspective, a bad e-learning or online training is if it has a lack of practice. Because if it's really only theoretical, of course, it's not very easy, or it's not easy at all to provide practical competencies via online classroom or maybe a computer. But still, I think the worst what could happen if we are all in adult education, if somebody who is actually searching for more competencies development is going to be providing only theoretical knowledge. Nowadays, it's somehow a no-go. And the future is in a good combination of theory and of the practice.
Fair enough. Paul, what do you think? I mean, I'm quite interested, especially, Tim and Paul, on your take on this, because I think, Tim, from what I've seen of what Lobster Ink did, you spent a lot of time on theory and delivering, theory. How did you tackle the practical side?
So, Tim, if you don't mind, I start. So, just to have a review, when I've been starting in this whole ecosystem in training and learning, we had about 2 to 3 to 4 hours online learning courses. with one block, so that the outcome and as well the transfer, the learning impact of these trainings have been absolutely terrible, let's say. And what we did, we just shortened up these learning courses up to learning nuggets. We just shrink them down to 2 to 3 to 5 minutes maximum learning sessions, and just scope them and sharpen them on smaller topics and smaller snippets. That was the first topic. By coming up of, or by rising of these new technologies as AR and VR, a door opened for us to get immersive training on a completely different level. So by just not only telling to face-to-face or frontal training, but to engage the whole learners in a virtual environment, to make them feel this experience hands-on in a virtual environment, to get the experience to train as well, safety trainings, to learn topics in a high security environment, hands-on. That was something what for me was an amazing aspect, and as we can see as well, regarding to the transfer of these, let's say, blended or immersive trainings, increased massively.
And I think, yeah, I totally agree with that. That was certainly our findings in that, especially given.
We lost Tim.
Yeah.
Lloyd, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes,
you.
again.
We had a similar result, Paul, in hitting the optimal lesson duration for us in terms of the hundreds of millions assessments that we analyzed was between 3 to 5 minutes if it was a video lesson. You know, to answer your question directly, Lloyd, the biggest mistake that we saw was people using technology for technology's sake, and especially in online learning, video for video's sake. There's video and then there's bad video learning. And if what you're going to do is take an existing 40-minute lecture and film yourself from the back of a lecture hall and call that video-based training, you are doing everybody a disservice. You have to think about the medium itself and format your learning in such a way that you are optimizing video. For example, if you're using a talking head with text and slides coming up over what this person is saying, you are got to be very careful in terms of managing cognitive load. And if you get text which is not identical to what the person is saying, or if there's additional information coming in with that text, it doesn't add to the learning experience. It's been proven that it actually detracts from it, because you start getting cognitive load issues where someone's trying to process the audio channel and the video channel, and the two are conflicting. So you have to be very careful with using the tricks of video and everything that video can offer, but make sure that what you are doing is staying true to the way that the brain works in terms of behavioral science and in terms of cognitive science. Using video for video's sake and doing it wrong can actually be a detrimental learning experience, especially if you're dealing with non-first language speakers, where this was often the case in our experience.
I'd just like to add one topic to your thoughts, Tim, and that's something what I had a lot of experience with. For me, it was very impressive to see that kind of analog training concept was just transferred one-to-one into a digital format, and same size, same length, same wording. Just putting a face-to-face session in a video session or in a virtual session, that doesn't make any sense. So you have to just reinvent and rethink the whole process from scratch, and building actually a complete new training, and setting different aspects in a complete new way. And that's something what, out of my point of view and out of my experience, really most of the responsible stakeholders in learning don't do. They want to take their old contents and just transfer them one-to-one in a digital environment. And that It's not working actually.
100% agree. And I see Yuliya.
I can't hear you.
What is your bonus?
I couldn't hear you, unfortunately. Maybe can you repeat what you just said? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said, I see you nodding a lot. And
Yes, yes and no, except not no. I mean, I completely agree with Tim and with Paul if we are speaking about a classic lessons, but in adult education, we also use workshops. And the workshop which we provide in a face-to-face format could be provided identically in the digital format as well. So with maybe a little restructuring or something, but of course I completely agree, we cannot just make the same sequences and what we done for face-to-face training and put them in the digital classroom and say, okay, it's going to work. It's a big mistake and it's never going to work.
Perhaps as well one example to you, Yuliya. We currently did create a kind of virtual design thinking area. Normally, we are within Accenture, we are running design thinking workshops within 1 or 2 days, hands-on at the client side, which is very intensive. You've got a lot of traveling time, you've got preparing time and wrap-up times, etc. And right now, we started to run the same design thinking workshops in a virtual environment, strapped down to 4 15-minute sessions. So we are meeting in VR, running, using sticky notes, using whiteboards, using everything what you've got in real life as well, in a virtual environment. And the interesting topic, the outcome from these virtual design thinking sessions is almost the same as the on-site sessions at the customers, but it takes you 4 times 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul, I think, you know, on the last topic or the last subtopic we go through here, I want to touch on this further. I want to really delve into it. Tim, I wanted to ask you something. When we had our discussion yesterday, you mentioned to me, or you started talking about learning fatigue and the concept of learning fatigue. And I found that pretty interesting, you know, because that's something we've stuck with, but I don't think we've refined the science as much as you have. You know, so switching up media types clearly keeps you engaged. It keeps you awake. It's fine. If you're just delivering video after video after video, it's a problem. Do you want to give us a little more on that?
Well, yeah, I think our experience showed that we started off with one media type, which was video, and we spent a lot of our research and our energy developing the best way to attack certain types of content and certain audience groups with video, and that became a specialty of ours. But pretty soon we realized that if video was the only tool that we had, every problem would start to resemble a nail, and we were using video for content types that weren't necessarily best suited to video. And we developed a spectrum where we on the far left, we had knowledge transfer, and on the far right, we had knowledge check. And we had 7 or 8 different lesson types along that spectrum, with video lessons on the far left being a very broadcast format, very knowledge heavy transfer. There's not much knowledge check from a learner unless you do it in a very interactive way. It's a very passive learning experience. Assessment was a critical part that happened all the way through our video lessons, but as a content type itself, video lesson is knowledge transfer in the extreme. We then had to develop different ways where if I was learning a process, video is not necessarily the best format. We developed a process lesson type where I was asked to make certain interactions along the way, even if the content transfer part of that lesson was video. On the far right, we had simulations as a lesson, which is closest to probably what Paul delivers in a VR sense, where I'm not necessarily having a knowledge transfer to me. I'm being asked to demonstrate my knowledge by making decisions or executing on a task. And as we expanded the list of lesson types and started to learn which ones worked best for the certain learning objectives that we developed, we saw that video itself, even if used exclusively for the content that was best suited to video, if we daisy chained 5 or 6 videos in a row, we saw less success in the assessments that followed. And we started to use variety of lesson types as a tool to increase the dopamine spikes, to increase interest, and to keep the user's attention for longer if that segment of learning required you know, an extensive period of time before they completed that particular module. So it is good to increase the variety of lesson types to increase user engagement, as opposed to just picking the right tool for the right job. Finding that balance is a really important part of extending the learning experience when you have a lot of knowledge to transfer for a particular learning outcome.
Okay. Thanks. I mean, that kind of sums it up pretty well. And that really leads us into our next section, which is an online course is a combination of different elements, as you've just. What do you think the combination of media is for effective online learning? Direct this at Alecia, and just asking, I mean, I know maybe you don't have as much experience with online learning, but you have a lot of experience with learning and a fair amount with online learning. But what I'm really interested in here is you know, your job is adult education and vocational training, but your passion project is school level learners. Do you think there's a different set of medias that you need to deliver for those different groups, or what is your thoughts on that?
So I actually think that in both cases, there are things that you have to consider, you know, of course, in terms of the content, the delivery of the content, right? So for the adult learners, at least what I've seen, and I mean, and I'm not sure if I've even stated this before, but I have taught on the collegiate level, and I have done and conducted online workshops with students specifically in chemistry, right? And how do you communicate certain concepts and certain things to learners who have never seen chemistry, or maybe they don't remember it from their high school ages and high school classes? That can be very difficult, right? So I think there's a piece there that needs to be discussed, and that is really this combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning, right? So making sure that the instructor, if I'm the instructor, I'm heavily engaging with my students, no matter the age, right? So even in the adult learner case, that's very important, right? So I talked about that earlier. But then also too, I think a lot of the same kind of tactics and media can be used for both ages. You know, if you need to illustrate things using video, I think that's very important. And then having we talked a little bit about learning nuggets, right? So having some kind of explanation about that video. I also think that it's important to make sure that we have or show some kind of project, right? So if we're talking about chemistry, or we're even talking about, for example, FMEA, failure modes and effects analysis, right? It's easier to do those kinds of things when you're concentrating on inquiry or project-based types of learning to incorporate for both adults and also school-age learners. And also even practical case studies, right? So making sure that you're applying real topics to things that are going on in the world, right, to what you're actually teaching. And I think that those few things, and among others, right, I can even include gamification. You know, I know Paul and Tim, you guys have talked about AR and those kinds of things, and VR. I think those things are also important as well. But I think there are similar things or similar media that you can bring to both adult and young learners as well.
Okay, thanks. That was yeah, interesting. And the penny actually just dropped that, Yuliya, weren't you a school teacher before you did your PhD for a while?
Yes.
So then I'm going to have to direct the same question at you.
I would say that there is, I mean, it depends of learning target group. It depends of intercultural competencies. It depends of culture itself. I used to work in Belarus and in Russia, and I had a chance to meet a lot of people from different surroundings and how do they learn. So I would say that there is a big difference, not big difference, but there's a difference between learning in ways like young people or students learn and adults. I would say that adults learn best when they can practice what they learn. And to be considered effective training must include practice segments from my perspective. Good training material should be structured according to this and should be created as a practical reference guide which could be accessible at any time, at any place. It was my experience what I've done actually with adults during my training sessions with experts from industry, for example, and it was a little bit different in a school. It's as I said, the expectations are different, and one important thing is actually in adult or in a adult education or in a training business, it's a role of a trainer.
Okay. Paul, you look like you have some thoughts to add there.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Lloyd.
I see your eyes lighting up. Yeah.
No, just taking up the last topic Yuliya mentioned. So I did one of the major outcomes out of my PhD thesis was that it's on the one side very the content transfer is related to the trainer or the teacher, in fact. So if the teacher got good capabilities to yes, transfer knowledge, knowledge transfer is on the best way. So that a couple of years ago, to be honest. But what I want to point out here as well is that the learning method right now in schools actually, and I'm talking from a German point of view, might be all over the world, it's pretty different. But actually the curriculum in Germany is still based in the 1980s. So the teachers get their studies on a base which is over 40 years old. And that's something we definitely should think about and redefine and rethink from scratch. So it's more or less an institutional change. So we have to change the whole system per se, because as you all know, going in school, starting at 7 in the morning, leaving at 1 or in the afternoon, this is not anymore the state of art, because if you're looking at our kids, they don't have the tendency bandwidth to get this whole time covered, because they are living more or less in a virtual world. Generation Y, Generation Z is working with immersive technologies as natives, and we have to think out of their point of view to create learnings, and that's as well something that's not only related to schools but as well to companies, because these Generation Z, Generation X, etc., these are colleagues as well, and they want to learn as well in a new environment. And we have to think how we can do hand-holding with them, and how we can bring them in these new learning environments, and how we can create these learning environments for them out of their point of view.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that's, yeah, carry on, Yuliya, sorry.
Yeah, I agree, Paul, but maybe one thing or one thought from my side, I think in all the discussions about new methods and didactics and everything, teachers and scientists forgot one thing. I mean, by we I mean people. We run still with the same software. It's our brain. We exchanges clump via mobile phone, but still how we learn. We read, we hear, we see something, then we memorize or we forgot, and then we reproduce. And in this chain, nothing changed actually. It was for ages the same like it is right now. It's it's psychologically actually evidence-based facts, but we use different speed for collecting the knowledge. We use different medium to achieve the knowledge or to develop competencies, and so on and so forth. That is really important to remember. And it's important to remember to adapt the methods, to adapt the methodology to the actual demands outside of young people or adults in the education.
Yeah, totally agree, Yuliya, totally. Yeah.
Yuliya, do you think that, and just a question from my side, but do you think that, for example, kids, well, these days, I mean, cell phones all the time, tablets, it has to somehow reprogram the structure of your brain to an extent, those neurological pathways, or do you think that the impact of that is minimal?
I think I would say I cannot measure how big or less is the impact, but one is clear, there is an impact, for sure. But I think important is to maybe to search or to think about for which competencies or kind of competencies could this ability be used at schools, for example. And of course, nowadays, young people without any phone, we cannot imagine. Everyone has the cell phone and iPad or I don't know what. But to have the iPhone or to have an iPad, it doesn't mean that they use it for learning and how to use it in the correct way for learning and so on and so forth. That is important, what I mean by method, to provide the correct techniques to use these. But also, not every competence or block of competencies can be provided for via digital, for example, way or format. For me, for example, a big lack of e-learning is social competencies. You cannot provide social competencies via computer. It's not possible. And human beings, they are social beings, and it's important, this interaction, face-to-face interaction as well. So that is what actually, from my perspective, the big disadvantage of e-learning, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with that point.
I disagree.
Okay, Paul, one last chance to strike back.
Sorry, Yuliya, I have to add just one topic. and I agree with you just regarding, let's say, tablets or cellular phones. In this context, it's definitely, I'm 100% on your page. If you're looking at, for instance, a virtual environment, if you're using virtual headsets, you can definitely train as well these social competencies in an environment, and you can train to behave in a certain way by interacting with as well artificial intelligence, by as well interact in virtual environments with self-learning avatars. So that's at this point of time already possible, and that's what we're currently as well are doing. Mm-hmm. Partly agree.
Maybe
so Paul,
just I will correct myself. We have still a lack of social interaction in e-learning.
Yeah. Okay, that's a fair statement. Paul, I think you know where I stand on your comment and the topics, but I want to play devil's advocate in that in a second. But I wanted to address a question to Tim, just sort of following on from this. Tim, you built a business around almost pure online learning, right? And your business model was very much around pure online learning. Now, I believe, obviously, there's an ideal state. Just hang on a sec. I'm not sure why I'm doubled in there. Okay. Obviously, there's an ideal state where you are able to, you could give your client whatever they want, but there are also economic constraints, right? And those are real factors. Why did you sort of go with pure e-learning in the context of what Yuliya and Paul have just said?
I think that's true to a certain extent, Lloyd, but we built our business as a live training business, face-to-face. That's where we started before we had to make the digital transition. And so we still firmly believe that there are content types and there's massive benefits to in-person training, especially for higher end skills, management level, these sorts of things where nuance is important, where communication in a face-to-face environment, where understanding your team, etc., are absolutely vital. What we tried to do as Lobster with the digital online component was to make sure that we were finding the most efficient way to do the knowledge transfer part of the learning experience and assessing that in such a way that we could reliably report on results in terms of the learner's completion or their competence, their ability to understand or execute on process. The goal with that was not to get rid of live training, but was to empower managers at the hotel level or at the restaurant level to understand the audience level, understand what people knew in terms of the foundational learning they required, and then to adapt face-to-face learning to add that nuance, to add that contextualization, which was so important. We spent a lot of our energy on our online courses training managers on how to do better live training sessions. So it's not that we don't believe in that medium at all. We just wanted to say, we will take care of the knowledge transfer component. We will assess it in a consistent way, and we will teach you on how to use that fantastic foundation to add nuance, to add detail, to add context, which will bring this content in line, whether you're in Chicago, whether you're in Doha, whether you're in Cape Town. The knowledge that these individuals have learned needs to be applied to a very specific context. And that we believe was best done in person. But we wanted to take care of everything else in a reliable and consistent way. And training is such an expensive thing to do. It's so expensive at scale for a company like Marriott, 800,000 people. They calculated, for example, that a front desk supervisor, time to competence was 250 hours of training before they were ready to operate as a fully functional front desk supervisor. That was done by webinars, by flying people in, by long PowerPoint sessions that someone had pre-recorded, et cetera, et cetera. We proved that we could reduce the time to competence by 60%. Now, across the entire audience of Marriott, in the first year of us working with them, we saved them $100 million. Well, that was a calculation that they made. Just by reducing the broadcast level knowledge transfer by using the medium the right way. To, a 40-minute webinar, we reduced to about 2 5-minute or 2 6-minute lessons in terms of content transfer. Someone might watch that same lesson twice if they didn't grasp it, but that's up to them. That's the individualization, which is so powerful in e-learning. Mm-hmm. Now, to really answer your question, we believe there is a critical part for face-to-face interaction, a critical part for virtual reality, for AR, for very specific skills. That is the best tool for the job. What we don't like to see is companies trying to say that VR will solve every problem or that live training will solve every problem. Mm-hmm. If you come into this with an open mind and you say, there are 52 different tools that we can use in terms of what we have right now, let's find out what the objectives are. Let's understand our audience extremely well, and let's use the right tool for the right job, understanding the human limits of cognitive load and being really respectful of that. Then I think you're best placed to produce content which really works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Look, and I completely actually agree with you on that point. There are so many different content types, and using the right one in the right place is A, more effective, and B, often more cost effective for the client too. Okay.
Sorry, Lloyd, just to add one.
Go ahead. Sure.
And at the end of the day, it's a business case. You have got to decide what costs you as a company to create a certain curriculum or to create certain content, and what is the outcome of this. And if the best outcome is to use a virtual reality training, which costs more than to produce some videos, you just have to figure out what is more effective for the company. Sorry, Lloyd, to interrupt.
No, absolutely. No problem. It's a good point. Should we, just having a little look at the time here, but move on to the next one, which I think is really quite an important question too. And I want to use something that Yuliya said earlier, but I'll ask this. But when engaging learners remotely, so this is the opposite of that negative question in the beginning, and the positive one is, what constitutes good learning and why? What is your dream course and why when you think of online learning? We've all done online courses, we've all worked with them. So maybe we could just go around the panel, starting with Alecia again, and just kind of tell us what your dream course would be and for what reason.
You know, just kind of thinking about my experience about, you know, really good learning experiences, either in person or virtual. I think one of the main things that comes to mind is, you know, just kind of being excited about the learning environment that we're in, right? So, for example, if you kind of need to meet the students where they are almost initially. As soon as they get onto the platform or as soon as they come into the classroom, you need to be able to kind of build some type of connection with them as an instructor. And I think that's a really key first piece in order for everything else in that learning experience to be considered good, right? Because now you've built a rapport with them, you have some things that they can relate to and you can relate to them. And I think that's kind of a really, really important piece. And, you know, of course, reading off of a presentation, like I said earlier, that's not going to work in class or in a live session, in person or virtually. So that's not going to work. And I really think too that good learning also consists of this collaboration piece, right? So when you have, I know a lot of people may not necessarily like group work or things of that sort, but the thing is that, you know, the research shows that collaborative learning and making sure that you talk to your classmates about their experiences and being able to apply those are things that really help you learn, right? So their experience can help you and vice versa. And then also too, I think sometimes, and this is something that we've done in the STEAM organization, right? So testing a concept in a large group is usually not effective, right? So let's say you have a really good idea about something you want to try out. It's important to maybe consider using a smaller focus group to test out some of those concepts, right? So let's say let's say you want to do a particular project with a group of students, and you know this project may be it just may take, you know, a very long time to complete, as an example, right? Doing that with a smaller group, a smaller focus group, will help you kind of see what that looks like at scale with larger groups, right? So we've even worked with young people as large as 70 young people on a Zoom trying to learn scientific concepts, right? And I think, you know, being able or trying to adjust, learning to adjust something that on that smaller scale and then being able to scale that up, that's really important as well. So I think there is something to be said about using that smaller group and then scaling that up. So those are just a few things that I think constitute good learning. And I really think that it's important for you to use that environment, you know, use the people there, you build that rapport with the people there first to kind of get their attention and help them to feel comfortable in that learning environment and in that space so that you can continue with learning the concepts that you want to instruct.
Okay. Okay, great, thanks. And Yuliya, from your perspective, what do you feel, your perfect course is, or perfect arrangement of content, and what makes it effective?
For me, or from my perspective, actually I have for me just a formula with 2 words. It is a great flexibility and variety. A great flexibility, it meant that I can do it whenever I want to do, and on the place, it doesn't matter where I am, in my workplace, at home, or in the holidays, if you wish. And
Okay.
the variety of different methods, variety of different medium, variety of different conversations, because you can use, actually you can provide in digital environment everything, and tandem communications, or communication in small groups, and everything. So these are for me the 2 important characteristics for a really good event.
All right. Okay. And Tim, from your side, what are your thoughts?
I love what Yuliya has said there. I think the perfect course for me is down to a few different things. The first is personalized. This is where technology can be so powerful. We saw that the quickest way to lose someone's attention in terms of drop off on a particular lesson was to teach them something they already know. So if we can make sure that we're using technology to diagnose what you do and don't know, and we are tailoring the course to fit your needs, that's personalizing it for me, which is vital. The flexibility that you spoke to, Yuliya, allow me to control my pace. If I don't get this, let me rewatch that in my time. If this is too slow for me, let me skip ahead. It's the biggest problem with in-person training, where invariably the lecturer or the trainer is teaching to the medium, which is you're going to lose some people on the fast and the slow end. A critical third point is practical application. The perfect course for me tells me immediately and repeatedly why this is important for what I need to do. It links it to my reality. This is not some hypothetical context teaching me something that I will never need in my job. You've lost me already. And show me why it's important for me to learn this and for me to apply this. And the last one is entertain me. I'm a human. I'm not an avatar on the other end of a screen that has no life. I have emotions. I like to laugh. Those emotions help me to retain knowledge. They help me to motivate myself. So remember that I am a human, and I'm not just an unknown robotic user on the other end. We have so much opportunity with the mediums that we use to entertain people. And if we forget that, we are not going to inspire them to keep going with the course.
Right. I think it's a pretty good, unique point. I think Paul's obviously got a slightly different kind of perfect course. What are your thoughts, Paul?
No, I totally agree to the topics Tim mentioned. So perfect. I just wanted to add 2 more topics. The first one, I want to get rid of all of these PowerPoints in my perfect course. PowerPoint is really pain for me. And even though I'm working at Accenture, that's something what I'm currently changing. So I'm about to get rid of these nasty PowerPoint slide decks. I can't see them anymore. So that's the first topic. The second topic, it's pretty similar what Tim mentioned as well. The more interactive, the more hands-on you can put and get in a learning session. So just get the learners attracted, get them internally, intrinsic motivated by using what they need, what solves their daily problems, not in a long term, but in a short term.
Okay.
Without PowerPoint.
No PowerPoint. Look, I actually need to give you a call after this and set up a presentation with you.
Yes, please send me some decks.
Okay, well, in all of this, and just want to bring something back from the last question we had, and something you touched on, Yuliya, that was quite interesting. Was you said culturally relevant content types. So you've often spoken about learning types, and now you're talking about culturally relevant training types. Well, doing everything multiple times. Can you not hear me? Is this
Right
better?
now, yes, but before it was
Kind of dropped out.
Okay, I'll just start again. Luckily, I like talking, so it helps.
Thank you.
Okay, well, you were talking about culturally relevant training types. And, you know, to me, it's looking at saying something like, right, we have, you know, if we're using training in different cultures, we need to adapt that training. And I think you touched on this from one side, Tim kind of touched on it from another, is, you know, where's the practical line in the middle between, you know, producing 6 different lessons for the same lesson to be culturally sensitive? And do you know of technology or ideas? Like for me, often animation is a good technology to use. But the question really is, how would you envision using culturally relevant content and delivering it for people? And each person has a different learning type. How does that look to you?
I mean, the technical point of view, I would just pass to Paul maybe later. I have no idea how I can use solve this challenge via technique. But what I mean is that people in the United States, in Europe, let's say, or in Asia, they learn differently. That's a fact. So, but there is enough of surveys which actually provide us enough of evidence-based facts how people learn in those countries or in those cultures, and which actually, and we should, if we develop training, we cannot just ignore this kind of facts and data. We have to use it if we have this ambition to provide a training or to develop a training which is going to be to find access to the world. Of course, let's say, for example, our bestseller is VDA 6.3 Process Auditor, and we provided the same training in the whole world. So in somehow, of course, it runs really well, but still, I do not believe that the success of learning in Germany is the same like it is, for example, in our office in China, because they learn differently. We have the discussion right now with our China office about e-learning as well, that, for example, they in some cultures, people still prefer to communicate directly. It's not a must, but there are some target groups that they say, okay, even in Germany, we do not going to have the access to everybody with the e-learning. It is still a concept of a future. And interesting experience we collect right now within the pandemic time. We just were expecting that people are going to wait for e-learning, or the demand is going to increase. But right now we do not actually have this kind of experience, and because, for example, in Germany, and I still speak about adult education, people prefer to learn in a traditional way. I've done some researches, for example, because I wanted to remove completely all the printed learning materials, and I was really excited about this fact that we are going just to provide it in a digital way. And the most of our participants and trainees, they wanted to have a printed material. I was shocked. So we can discuss a lot about what is actually, from our perspective, important, but still we are not allowed to completely forget about the opinion of industry. And this is really important, just to collect enough of facts and data and information about different cultures, how do they learn, what they prefer, which are the successes if they learn in different ways, and just to use it in the basics for developing a training.
Okay, that's a pretty fair answer. Tim, I think you, as you mentioned in the beginning, you did a lot of training through Africa, and if there's one continent with a lot of different cultures on, it's here. How did you get around that? You know, just expanding on what Yuliya said in terms of, you know, different cultures do learn.
I think I might have lost Lloyd there, but I think I get where he was going. Yeah. Certainly it was a challenge, and you know, we were producing video content and media content in a variety of different formats at an extremely high rate, and constantly when we were thinking about the production and who we were including in the video footage and language and you know, the pace of the narrator. What is it? A female narrator? Is it a African narrator? Is it a British narrator? What cultural and non-cultural effects does do all of these decisions have when you're dealing with a piece of media content? When we knew that a piece of content or something had to apply to a wide range of cultures and do that in a responsible way, rather than trying to produce 9 different versions of something to make sure that no one was offended or that we ticked all the boxes, what we always recommended to our clients who were always paying for the production of this content was that we include perhaps a lesson towards the start of the course that spoke to cultural variations, that spoke to the differences in context that you might see this. You know, a guest might react in a certain way, or you might learn, you might have to change your behavior in a certain way to adapt to your context, to at least set the scene for the fact that culture is being acknowledged here as part of this course, and we understand the complexities that come with it. We never operated under the assumption that people learn in different ways across different countries. Of course, there is truth in that. You know, we were dealing with video, and take, for example, the way that it works in Hollywood. People in the Western world typically read left to right, and it's long been a Hollywood Hollywood way of working that the good guy will enter in from the left-hand side. It's jarring if the good guy comes in from the right. It's against what we used to. And that's one of many different things in film science that you have to take into account. If you want to create the feeling of intimidation, you put the camera below somebody so that you're looking up to this intimidating character. In the Far East, it's a completely different thing. If you want to show respect for somebody, you would be looking from below upwards. And these are big generalizations. People read from right to left in different parts of the world. So the same things don't apply. So if you try to take all of that into account, unless you have a very specific target group that you're producing the content for, I believe it would be prohibitively expensive, and you might be paralysis by analysis. If you know who you're targeting it for, absolutely do the research and understand the best way to reach that audience and do it in a culturally responsible way. We couldn't, unfortunately, do that at scale unless the client specifically directed us in that direction.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Just being here in the U.S., of course, we have many different cultures and experiences here. And I think that in my experience, what I've seen is that there are nuances that you have to have, and it's easier to do, of course, not on a smaller scale, right? So Tim, you mentioned, you know, doing it on a smaller scale is definitely more feasible and more doable. But at the end of the day, what we've seen and what I've seen is that it is important to consider those differences in culture, and especially when we're working with young people, right? So if I'm instructing young people, they definitely are more attracted to things that they may have seen, you know, on social media, on TikTok and things like that. And it is critical, I think, in those instances to make sure that those things, the topics that you're learning are culturally relevant for them. Otherwise, again, they don't have that application. They're not able to see and connect those topics to them.
Okay. Yeah, that's a pretty fair point. I think, you know, Detroit especially is, as a city, it's very, very culturally diverse, very interesting. For sure. And all of those things have to be considered, right? You know, even when we talk about, and I saw that there was a question in the Q&A about, you know, things being equitable, right? How do we address learning being equitable? All of that, even here in the U.S., is also
sometimes culturally relevant, right? Because it seems that if you're from an underrepresented minority group or underrepresented group in STEM or STEAM, then you don't have the equitable pieces that you need to actually be successful and put yourself in those places where you can learn in the best ways that we've all been discussing, right? So I think all of that's important, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But I did, of course, Detroit, it's a very interesting dynamic here, and we do have to take those things into account when we talk about learning online.
And Deirdre, Alecia, just to answer or add to that, Deirdre's question, my answer to it takes one aspect of being equitable and inclusive, and that is providing access. That was the biggest challenge that we had. A lot of technologies were designed for a very first world experience, and we had to deal with the most remote parts of the world, sometimes in a large part dealing with people who had never completed any level of formal education, who had never accessed a computer. Often the first time someone in our environment had worked with a computer was in a Lobster Ink learning experience. So that access is what I speak to in my answer there, but there's far more in terms of inclusivity, in terms of representing the cultural realities that people work with, and not having 100% white actors in an environment where that's not reality, which can often be the case. Or, working in the Far East and pretending that, Western actors delivering the services and the skills is going to resonate. It cannot. And it depends how much, it's the responsibility of both the companies who are using this content and the companies who are developing it to make sure that they are being inclusive and relevant in these spaces, because not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's more effective.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. 100%.
Okay, brilliant. As I think we're almost at question time, and I see there have been quite a few questions popping up in the chat. I might ask one of my team to access those, or in a second, just ask the participants to stick up their hand. But we have one final kind of question, and I'm not going to read out the whole of the fourth question, but I'm going to come back to something that's quite important: proximity. Online learning removes proximity. We touched on this in the beginning, and Paul, you've used quite a few VR examples. But this has always been a concern with online learning. How do you capture attention? How do you keep attention? In a classroom, that's pretty easy to do. But from an online perspective, it becomes very difficult. So I think I'll start with you, Paul, because you did touch on this earlier. VR interaction, I think everyone's quite aware of, but will we ever have blended learning that's in a virtual classroom, in your opinion? And what do you think the future of training looks like, where we can create proximity, micro movements in the face, micro expressions, versus what we have right now, which isn't quite there?
There are a couple of approaches we can mention here. So the proximity topic, if you're just looking at VR trainings, for instance, is pretty easy to handle, because you're just moving in a virtual space. You've got spatial audio, which as well shows you if somebody is near to you or somewhere in behind. You can separate rooms by using this technology, so that's pretty easy. What I am as well want to mention is to get. I would not recommend to run an 8 hours learning session in VR. So that definitely wouldn't work. So my approach is as well to run blended learning. So you have to as mentioned before, you have to select which kind of medium you want to use to transport which kind of knowledge. And if you, for instance, want to run some kind of technical trainings, VR is very, very helpful. AR is as well very helpful to run, for example, a training by using the Microsoft HoloLens, and you've got something hands-on. You can manipulate. You can just show. You can explode parts, or you can redeploy them. But in general, I think the mix of methods is what needs to be considered. So you just have to define which use case is shown up best in which technology. And
okay.
To come back to the topic proximity, you've got this as well. So it's pretty difficult in these times to get face-to-face trainings managed because of COVID. But for, let's say, for a midterm or long term, it's out of my point of view as well something you would need to have because of socializing. So it's just as well one part which needs to be included in a training as well. It's just the bandwidth is just widening up. So you've got more media and more kind of tools you can rely on.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, and delivery is an interesting thing, but interaction is really, in my opinion or my experience, often being on webinars, interaction gets lost somewhere along the way. That's, I mean, you've got a good webinar, you've got interesting conversation, you've got something that's going, but keep this going 4 or 5 hours. Or 3 or 4 days into an event, and you start losing people in a big way. They just have fatigue. Yuliya, from your experience, training over this period, have you been able to keep people captured in a screen, or do you think there's some future that looks a little different?
It is a big challenge, I would say. For me to provide face-to-face training is much more easier as to provide the training in the virtual world. And then I just want to mention what I mentioned before about the trainer rule. And I mean, the rule of a trainer is quite well established by now. And when you ask a trainer a question, what do you do as a trainer, then he or she will tell you about presenting and providing the new knowledge with practice examples, moderating discussions, being an expert and sharing her or his experience, and etc. And such understanding of trainer's competence become obsolete from my perspective. There is nothing wrong with this understanding of a trainer's role, but new training methods, new technologies, new ways of developing competencies, and new expectations of trainees create the gap between what is perceived as a good set of trainers' competencies and what is demanded by the market. And of course, every trainer is free to deliver the training based on traditional rules and responsibilities because of diversity of trainees, which we mentioned before, but every modern trainer should be ready to take, let's say, the role of companion. And it is really a big challenge for the trainers. It is really a big one. And of course, to capture the attention, to hold them active all the time, it's not easy. And my solution is just to make a lot of pauses, to give the possibility to I don't know, to stand up, to go around the table, to come back and to discuss a lot, just to move because they move in the traditional classroom, and it's really important in somehow to provide this kind of techniques or this kind of pauses, because I mean, even for me to sit 1-2 hours on a computer is not that easy, and to do this all the time and with really one important thing, to learn something, not just to hear, to remember, and then to transfer the knowledge into the practice. And that is the big challenge. And if we have assessments after, so it's really difficult. somehow it's going to be a future, and we have to find some, as Paul said, we have to find the correct media for the correct content, and try to provide it in a good mixture of different methods. And one point what I would like to mention, that there is no king's way, because every teacher wants to have this recipe how to solve one problem or how to deliver a great training. So there is no king's way. So somehow every trainer or instructor should try something new with different groups, because the groups the group I have today is not the same like I'm going to have tomorrow. So it's just to, let's say, invent the training from the zero every day.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think reading a class and reading a group and getting those nuances and keeping them interesting and, as Tim said earlier, entertained. I know from our side that's a major factor and challenge. And that's hard enough in person, but virtually becomes a giant challenge. I've always sort of been of the opinion or noticed that to teach theory via e-learning is great. We're there. The technology is there to be able to bring across theory and knowledge, to really transfer knowledge. But interaction, I think we're still building. Alecia, what, you or Tim, do you have any thoughts to add on this topic?
Yeah, I think to add to kind of what you're saying, I really think it all comes down to the instructor, simply in a few words, being curious about the class, right? Being curious about who's in the room with them. And when we talk about that curiosity, that comes back to my original points about, building rapport with the class at the beginning, right? So that could be something as simple as doing conducting polls at the beginning, right? So how are you guys feeling? Here's a pop quiz all of a sudden, right? Calling on students individually, right? So, all of those different things I think are really important, and really just helping the students feel comfortable in that space, because it's absolutely critical. So like I said, the instructor just has to be curious about the people in the room.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, guys, Tim, I don't know if you've got anything to add, but we're sort of heading into the last 5 minutes of this webinar, and I just wanted to see if there was anyone else who wanted to ask any question or questions to the panelists at this stage. See, we have one hand. Jörg, give me 1 second. I think Taryn can activate you. Go ahead.
Hi, guys, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Okay, cool. Hey, a pleasure to meet you guys. One of the things I want to ask you, because it was a really 1.5 hour interesting meeting, to be honest, and without PowerPoint. So it was a good thing, to be honest. I agree with all you said. I agree with everything you said. But maybe just a quick one, guys. My father was a teacher, and he was a good teacher. And the guys were happy, the learners were happy. But one thing he mentioned in the past was one of the most efficient things was he taught the class, but in the afternoon there was some kind of mini classes. So a group of 3 or 4 or 5, and the cleverest one tried to teach the other ones. You know what I mean? So it was only the learners in a mini group. What's your thoughts on that? Just let me know. I would be really impressed.
May I do first?
Yes, of course.
I really love this idea, and that's currently what we are doing to set up for instance development in Scrum teams. So we've got one experienced colleague who is just spreading his knowledge to the less experienced or more junior colleagues. And that's actually the same topic by running this knowledge transfer in classes. So you've got one experienced trainee in there, and you just delegate to him to train or to bring the others up to speed, and that's definitely a very appropriate approach.
Yeah.
If I can
Thanks,
add
Paul.
to that,
I saw the sum. Thanks, Paul.
Jörg, I think you answered why the reason that your father was such a successful teacher, because even to set that environment up for the learners is groundbreaking and innovative. There is absolutely no doubt that people learn better and perform better in terms of demonstrating their knowledge when judged by the jury of their peers. When people concentrate harder, they will work harder for longer, trying to impress their peers than trying to impress their lecturer or their teacher. And we've seen that in practical environments and in practical executions where we enabled peer-on-peer practical assessment as opposed to peer-on-manager. So absolutely the case, and the more the learning environment can encourage that, and I think VR is another excellent execution for this, creating VR environments for people to interact with their peers as opposed to being directed by their lecturer. I think you're onto a winning tactic. That's my 1-year-old. That's not I'm not that hungry.
You're allowed to be hungry.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah,
thanks,
but thanks, Tim.
Yuliya, did you have a quick comment?
Yes, actually, in our Train the Trainer, I even provide or advise our trainers to do this. I always say, if you have somebody in the class who really has strong knowledge or competences in one field, it's perfect, it's great. Include them in the learning process. You can only, as a trainer, have a big profit. Just do it and delegate to these people, and then it makes the training even more interactive, and it is somehow a really great experience for the whole group, including the trainer.
Got you. So I think we're all in agreement on this one, that's quite a good way to go. Guys, I think maybe we have time for one more quick question before we have to call it a day. Can we get... Natasha, you should be able to, we should hear you now.
Hi there, it's Tez speaking. Thank you very much for the session. It's really been very informative and a lot of information that you've given. One of the points that you actually touched on was that it's really important to work with the team that's actually putting the training program together to understand the audience that you're working with. And there's so many different sensitive topics out there, and considerations need to be in play. What I would be interested in is one of the passions that I have is working with members in industry that have disabilities, especially disabilities in and around mental, in regards to maybe dyslexia or other reading difficulties, especially in countries that are third world, where reading and interpretation of the screen and that. I was interested in how you actually went about it in taking that into consideration, what lessons you learned, and how you could share that insight and that knowledge with the rest of the audience when they're actually putting programs together. Thanks.
Okay. I think that's a pretty good, fair question. I'm not sure who wants to field that one. Alecia, you smiled first, so I think we've got to leave that one to you.
Okay, so I know for us, and especially the work that I mentioned, doing the work in the community, particularly with inner city Detroit youth, there tends to be several challenges that we might see. from accessibility. So, and like you said, there might be some other disability and things of that sort. But one of the things that is really important for us is that, one, we even consider it, right? So looking into methods that work best and using evidence-based practices to help those things. Even with some of the activities and things that we do, we want to make sure that everyone has the ability to understand it. So for example, we know that in some cases, some students, even if they're in the same grade level or same age range, they may not necessarily understand things in comparison to other counterparts who may have had tons of experience. They may have had summer programs. They may have had all these other things. And so how do we balance, or what do we do to make sure that that's balanced? And so in a lot of ways, what we do is we work with different community organizations where we try to ensure that those young people who may not have had all of that exposure, that they get some additional exposure so that now we create that balance. So that's just one way that I know has worked for us. But I mean, even in terms of, you know, what are differentiated learning techniques, right? So if I go back to my example about being the instructor and making sure that I understand the room, and I understand the young people that are in the room, I also have to understand that everyone is going to learn differently. And with that being said, some students may need, more visuals. Some students may need more, they like to read, or maybe they like to use their hands and have more textile-based learning activities. And I think that's all about trying to, kind of using those ideas and again, just being curious about the young people that are in the room. So that's my perspective. That's also, kind of been my experience, is just trying to kind of assess the room and use those, making sure that you understand that, making sure that we understand differentiated learning techniques are really important for everyone to get that information.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alecia. Does anyone else have any comments to add on that one? I think right now. All right, Tez, I hope that kind of gave you some insight and some ideas.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Great. Well, guys, that's right on time. So I just want to thank everyone for coming, so all of my panelists for giving of your time. Thanks so much, Paul, Yuliya, Alecia, Tim. Really appreciate it. It was a really interesting discussion. I really enjoyed that. And thanks to all the participants that have joined here and the guys live streaming on Facebook. I really appreciate all of your time, and hopefully this has been informative, or as informative for you as it has for me. Great.
Yeah.
So we will meet again soon. I think we need to do this again for sure.
Oh yeah.
It was a pleasure.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was
Thank
great.
you all.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Talk
Thank
soon.
you all.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.